Ascent Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Three-Bucket Leader, a simple framework to energize your employees, inspire your team, and fire up your followers. By Karen A. Gilhooly. Narrated by Erin Bateman. Introduction. I still remember the goosebumps when I heard the news. The CEO was summoning me to his office. Me! Account manager Karen was personally requested in the big office. I'd hardly worked at the bank a year, yet somehow the CEO already knew of me. How? A cosmic alignment of luck? Happenstance? Serendipity? As I stepped into the executive elevator, I could hardly believe it. Since my first week at his company, I had daydreamed of meeting the mythical Frank Fisher. This larger-than-life founder grew the firm from scrappy startup to household name with seemingly superhuman will. The stories of his relentless drive were legendary. Pre-dawn arrivals, all-night solo strategy sessions, timesheets that doubled the most diligent workers' counts. Even the senior VPs spoke of his accomplishments in hushed, mesmerized tones. And today, I would stand face to face with this business banking titan. My mind raced as the elevator climbed skyward. I could barely contain myself. What wisdom would he impart? Would he share the magical formula he followed to become successful? But the moment I stepped into his palatial office, my visions of grandeur crashed down. "Hi, welcome in. He had to glance down at a piece of paper on his desk. "Miss Karen." There was no gleam of recognition in his eyes. He gestured toward the chair in front of his desk, and before I was fully seated, he started a well-rehearsed monologue. This meeting wasn't a special coaching session, nor was it the start of a conveyor belt leading up to the exclusive C-suite. This was simply a mandatory meet and greet for random new recruits. Frank Fisher had no particular interest in me, my skills, or my career. My excitement fizzled out by the time he finished his spiel. I felt woozy with an energy hangover. What had he even said? "Do you have any questions for me?" he asked. I had 1,000. Right under my arm was the result of the previous night's frenzy, a notebook full of questions. Now, though, they all felt wrong. Naive, maybe. I was embarrassed to think he'd ever wanted to share the secrets of his success with me. I was only a check in a box, a name on a list made for crossing out. What questions could I possibly ask? "No, sir," I said quietly. "Thank you for your time." Crestfallen, I turned to leave, but Frank must have noticed my disappointment. Just as I reached the door, "Karen," I turned back. There was a sly grin on his face. "Do you want to know how I got so successful?" This perked me up. I nodded eagerly, stepping back toward his executive desk. He waited until I was right across from him, then leaned over the desk as if to share his most precious secret. "Here it is. When it comes to your work, always be in. Never be out." His words hung in the air, their simplicity belying the depth of their meaning. At first glance, the mantra seemed too straightforward to be the key to his success. If it was that easy, wouldn't everyone follow this advice? But as I mulled over his words, I began to sense that there was more to this simple phrase than met the eye. Once again, I deflated like a popped balloon. That was it? The secret to his empire? I found it hard to believe any successful business tycoon's mantra could fit inside a fortune cookie. If it was that simple, wouldn't everyone do it? Confused, defeated, and a little frustrated, I staggered out of his office. I went through the rest of my day with a chip on my shoulder and a splitting headache. I'd never felt so disenchanted. As I reflected on my meeting with Frank, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. At the time, the word engagement was nothing more than a buzzword buried in corporate memos. No one seemed concerned about whether people enjoyed their jobs or not. As long as the paychecks came every 2 weeks, the work was worth doing. Those who suffered from a lack of enthusiasm were perceived as lazy, rather than desperately yearning for inspiration and connection. Similarly, a person's purpose was abstract. Fulfillment was for successful celebrities like Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson, not account managers or customer service reps. Our purpose came from our responsibilities, not the other way around. We worked the job, cleaned the home, raised the kids, paid the bills, went to bed, and did it all again the next day. If we wanted more than that, something that actually engaged our interests, we were delusional. What I didn't realize then was that Frank Fisher's mantra, simple as it was true. He knew the value of engagement. Always being in and never being out was at the forefront of his mind throughout his career. Consequently, his decisions came from a place of purpose, fulfillment, and personal meaning. He lived his life to its fullest, and if his next potential move didn't engage him, he chose a different path. It took me years to learn the value in Frank's words. Eventually, I understood the importance of engagement and how it impacts our lives. This book shares stories and frameworks that explain engagement, its significance, and strategies to stay engaged. Time is our most valuable resource, and disengagement wastes it. If we want to make the most of our time in this life, we must be fully engaged, all in. To that end, what follows is my time-tested advice. And like Frank's advice, mine is also deceptively simple. It all starts with a bucket. Part 1. The Disengagement Problem. Chapter 1. 3 Buckets. "I don't know if I can do this again," Michael said. We stood on the balcony of an office building, backed against the Chicago skyline. My heart still raced from the throes of the strategy meeting. I imagined Michael's heart was racing too, but he hid his discomfort with a long drag on his cigarette. The summer wind whipped around us, tossing the curls of my hair into limbo. But whatever mess threatened my hair, it was nothing compared to the upheaval facing Michael and his team. A decision had to be made. This was my last chance to get through to Michael. Our department was in deep trouble, and the man standing across from me was at the heart of all the problems. The bank was out of patience, which meant I was out of time. I was the go-to woman for one of the world's largest bank's thorniest problems. Over the years, I'd earned a reputation as the engagement expert, coaxing dozens of employees out of workplace malaise. But Michael would prove a singular case, the first in years to impart a pivotal lesson that altered the course of my career. My role was that of an engagement paramedic. I was airdropped into flailing departments to resuscitate flatlining projects. The formula seldom wavered. Identify the diseased elements, revive morale with an adrenaline shot of vision, then build momentum with a long string of early wins. Every time I turned sure defeat into victory, I felt a physical rush. New challenges caused my mind to thrum. I loved diagnosing dysfunction and curing it with strategies for engagement. Time and again, I silenced the doubters, winning over the banking industry's weary and skeptical souls. My engagement elixir was distilled from equal parts psychology, persuasion, and chutzpah. After a series of Hail Mary successes, my methods grew celebrated. I became the emergency specialist on speed dial whenever leadership needed to pull a Lazarus. This wild ride took me through almost every facet of my organization, where I developed a graduate-level understanding of its inner workings. I turned around software teams, sales teams, analytics teams, customer service teams, and management teams in almost every city from Detroit to Albuquerque to Tucson. In over 2 decades, I never came up against a problem I couldn't fix. Until Michael. At his prime, Michael was the guy, the North Star of his division, a model leader who set a stellar example for up-and-comers. But the years of grinding away at his job had dimmed his guiding light to a small flicker. Now, on that fateful day in Chicago, my entire engagement toolkit couldn't break through his indifference. He might have been a star once, But he was a black hole now, swallowing up all motivation from himself and from his team. Throughout the strategy meeting, Michael countered my every idea with grunts or shrugs, retreating further into himself. Now on the balcony, cigarette in hand, he spoke words that shook me to my core. "I've been grappling with this decision for a long time, and I just don't know if this job is worth it to me anymore." His shoulders sagged, and my pulse quickened. My self-doubt turned to panic as a terrifying question gripped me. If my beloved methods can't spark Michael, how many people had I truly helped before? How long had I operated on illusion alone? On temporary feel-good adrenaline shots? For the first time in memory, the prospect of real failure stood before me, and I powerlessly stared back. "What do you mean the job's not worth it?" I stammered. "Michael, you're the guy. You're the one who built out our global franchise, who never took no for an answer, who moved mountains and got it done." "That guy doesn't exist anymore, Karen," Michael snarled. He pointed his thumbs toward his chest and shouted, "This is the guy. And I need you to take a good, long, hard look at this guy because this is what's left of him now." I winced as I recalled my declaration, loud and proud, to the CEO that I could turn Michael and his team around before the end of the quarter using my two-bucket system. This promise came with a degree of risk. If I couldn't pull it off, I'd have no choice but to return to headquarters defeated. The CEO specifically selected me for this assignment because of my previous success in similar situations. There was no way I could walk back into his office and tell him I missed the mark. Failure would not be accepted. Michael's department was bleeding over $500,000 in lost business every month, a hemorrhage that threatened both our jobs if left unchecked. My idea to host this expensive, high-profile Chicago meeting with Michael and 4 other senior executives hadn't moved the needle. The air thickened with unspoken ultimatums, and our suite transformed into a pressure cooker set to blow. I looked over the low clouds stretching off into the distance. As we stood in silence, I took a moment to consider my next move. Behind us, through the glass doors of the conference room, I knew the rest of the management team was watching to see what would happen in the next 60 seconds. I felt the last 20 years of my life compress into a single point, filling my body with a surge of energy. My heart thudded in my throat as my mind reeled. I knew I had to change tack or risk losing everything. "Let's look at this a little differently," I started. "Imagine 2 buckets. One is labeled engaged and the other disengaged. Every time a minute, that's capital M minute, goes by, you get a single coin to represent those 60 seconds. It's a minute coin, and you have to toss it into one bucket or the other. When I look at you, I see someone who is throwing all his minutes into the disengaged bucket. You're spending all your time checked out, Michael. But it doesn't have to be that way. Every 60 seconds, you have the power to make a new choice. You can engage." Michael lowered his cigarette and looked at me. "I was engaged, Karen. I spent every minute for 22 years engaged. I gave this place my blood, sweat, everything." He paused to take a drag. "And what did I gain from it all? My wife left me. My kids won't speak to me. I'm a wreck, having spent more time living in hotels than in the comfort of my own home." He laughed mirthlessly, a hollow sound as empty and desolate as a gust of wind whistling across a wasteland. "So you'll have to forgive my lack of enthusiasm now. I've got nothing left to give to this job or any other. I'm running on fumes in a race that never ends." He frowned and then continued. "You don't need to talk to me about the engaged bucket, Karen. I've lived that dream, and it's damn expensive. I've finally got my life back together, and I don't know if I can go down that road again. I don't think I want it. I wouldn't say I'm disengaged. I'm just numb." I flashed back to the old Michael, the poster child for engagement from seasons past. This was the man who tackled 18-month postings in Southeast Asia with zeal, back when his job and identity intertwined. Michael brought teams back from the brink for sport, transforming one after the other into well-oiled machines. We had crossed paths in those early days, and later lost touch as careers diverged, only to reunite years later. At first, I failed to reconcile the hollow ghost beside me with the passionate firebrand I once knew. The one who grinned through grueling journeys abroad, fueled by purpose rather than paychecks. As the years passed, his work slowly devoured his identity, consuming him from within like a ravenous beast. The job became his sole purpose, his reason for existence, until it had thoroughly digested every last morsel of his former self, leaving behind nothing but an empty husk, a mere shadow of the man he used to be. What happened, I wondered, sizing up the specter of my friend standing with me now? How did he lose everything, his family, his friends, and his fire, in a few short years? It was like his minutes weren't working for him, no matter which bucket he spent them in. At that moment, something clicked for me. "Actually," I said, "I think I've got it all wrong. You're not engaged or disengaged. You're in the middle. You're trying to make up your mind which direction you want to go. There aren't just two buckets. There's a third bucket, too, in between the others. And you've been throwing your minutes in there for quite some time." Michael inhaled deeply, drawing the cigarette smoke into his lungs once more. In the evening light, he looked almost black and white, like a film star from the 1940s. He exhaled little rings of smoke and gazed over my shoulder toward the loop and the dark void of Lake Michigan beyond. "Yeah," he nodded. "Sure." We stood still for a moment, not talking, watching the smoke from Michael's dwindling cigarette coil around us like a shroud. I broke the silence. "Michael, it's time to pick a lane. Either commit fully to bucket one, and I'll move heaven and earth to help you recapture your former glory. Or if your heart's no longer in it, and you'll acknowledge bucket three, I'll tap every connection I have to ensure you a safe landing somewhere new." I locked eyes with him. No more limbo. No more living in bucket two. No more going through the motions on autopilot. If this work still excites you, I'm ready to do what I can to support you. But if it's time to turn the page, let's start planning your next chapter. I leaned in, my voice gentle but firm. The only wrong choice is choosing nothing. So where does your gut say you belong? All in or all out? A painful moment passed as Michael brooded. Then I saw his shoulders straighten. He lifted his chin from his chest and turned toward me. For the first time in months, I saw a sharpness in his gaze as he looked me dead in the eye. "All right, Karen," he said confidently. "I'm out." Damn it! I stifled a gasp. It was like he'd punched the wind out of me, but I knew he meant it. There was no changing his mind. I nodded. "Okay, let's do it then." Over the next few weeks, I worked with Michael on his transition out of the organization. At first, there was a fair amount of pushback. This was not the solution anyone had in mind. Michael was the heart of the team. How would they exist without him? Remarkably, as we approached the final day of our transition, the team's productivity surged threefold. It was as if Michael's apathy had been a contagious virus, infecting the entire team. With his impending departure, the remaining four managers swiftly shed their indifference. Freed from the chains of stagnation, their performance soared to new heights. A revelation dawned. I had been treating the symptoms of inertia while allowing the real disease to spread like wildfire. No more. For years, I had played the role of engagement paramedic, so focused on reviving individuals that I failed to diagnose the root cause of the problem. The binary illusion. The way most leaders think about engagement is misguided, and I used to be one of them. Before talking to Michael on that brisk Chicago evening, I didn't realize my own mistake. I didn't believe in limbo. I was stuck thinking of engagement as a binary solution. You're either all in or all out. By ignoring the people who weren't either, who didn't feel motivated enough to choose, I missed a crucial variable. The human tendency to view engagement in binary terms is nothing new. It's a phenomenon that isn't limited to engagement or even the workplace. The human brain loves a good sorting system, and a one or the other solution is mathematically the easiest. If one person is tall, the next is short. If I'm fat, you're skinny. Not conservative? You must be liberal. Not smart? You've got to be dumb. Binary categories are straightforward, but they're not a reflection of reality. The world isn't as simple as black or white. It operates in shades of gray. Leaders who succumb to the binary illusion, as I did for the first decade of my career, view team members as either engaged or disengaged. This makes the objective seem clear: move the latter to the former. Drag the ones who are disengaged out from the dark side and help them see the light. If only it were that simple. The complications appear when the majority of the team is neither engaged nor disengaged. We can look at this issue as a bell curve, where most people's level of engagement is charted as a cluster in the middle, but a few hang out on either end. There's a reason statisticians refer to this as a normal distribution. The curve projects how people fall on virtually every type of measurement, from weight to height, to intelligence, to income, to political views. The binaries only exist as concepts in our minds, but we treat them as definitive rules for the world around us. There's another key statistical concept to keep in mind here, and that's reversion to the mean. This refers to people's tendency to move toward the average, or mean, on any scale. In stocks, prices and historical returns make their way back to the middle every few years. The world's most successful companies in the 1950s were mediocre by the turn of the century. The skinniest 20-somethings today will put on more than a few pounds by age 45. Watch the outliers on either end of any spectrum, and you'll see them slowly creep toward the middle of the pack. This means the most engaged people you lead will disengage over time, and the most disengaged people will likely mellow out. No matter where people start, they will all eventually end up in the same place, the middle. When it comes to engagement, a leader's true adversary isn't the highly motivated individuals who pour their hearts into their work, nor is it the completely disengaged employees who have checked out entirely, although their struggle should not be overlooked. The real threat lies with the vast majority stuck in limbo, perpetually wavering between engagement and apathy, squandering their potential minute by minute. Most of our employees, students, athletes, and followers are neither fully engaged nor fully disengaged. They're coasting along, tossing their minutes mindlessly into bucket 2, unable to decide whether they want to be all in or all out. When someone ultimately decides they are all out, they will inevitably part ways with the team, group, or organization. As such, these individuals don't pose a significant challenge for leaders. On the other hand, those who wholeheartedly embrace their roles and go all in are a pleasure to lead. They, too, are not the problem. People in Bucket 1 have made a clear choice to be fully engaged, dedicating their time to meaningful pursuits. Those languishing in Bucket 3 are struggling through their days, desperately grasping at any chance to escape their current misery. They're frantically scrambling to find a way out, be it through job hopping or drastic life upheavals. The time spent in Bucket 3 is often grueling and demoralizing, as these individuals desperately cling to the faint hope of a less miserable future, all while sacrificing their present well-being in the process. Bucket 2, the limbo bucket, is where minutes are most often wasted. Many times people slide into Bucket 2 without noticing. They're neither engaged nor disengaged. They're simply coasting along. They take each minute for granted, thinking, if I can just get through this, then life will be better. But without meaningful effort, life doesn't get better. It stays the same, and the minutes spent waiting are lost. The biggest threat to a team's success is not the highly engaged or disengaged individuals, but the majority stuck in the middle of the bell curve. These people coast along, indifferent and uncommitted, and their apathy can spread like wildfire. As leaders, it's our job to inspire these fence-sitters to choose engagement over indifference and create a culture that encourages everyone to bring their A-game to the field. The problem is that when we put our minutes in bucket 2, it's hard to muster the awareness to pull ourselves out. Most of the time, it takes some impactful event to snap us out of cruise control and force us to rev up, all in bucket 1, or pull over, all out bucket 3. It's our natural state to coast along, and so nobody is immune to the magnetic force of bucket 2. It can happen to any of us. For years, I couldn't wrap my head around how people could allow themselves to slip into a never-ending cycle of mediocrity. I used to think the solution was simple. If an activity no longer lights a fire within you, stop wasting your time on it. If you're not investing nearly all your energy into things that truly matter to you, either find a new reason to be passionate about what you're doing or move on to something else entirely. Oh, how naive I was. It wasn't until my husband took drastic action that I realized even I, the self-proclaimed engagement guru, wasn't immune to sliding back into the middle of the pack. Life was cruising along smoothly for quite a while. My firstborn graduated and embarked on a career in medicine, while my youngest set his sights on becoming a lawyer. My husband settled into retirement, and I found fulfillment in weaving my magic at the bank, keeping me both engaged and content. At some point, though, I stopped engaging. I don't know when or how it happened. I thought everything was fine, or at least my problems didn't feel overwhelming or all-consuming. My stress was good stress. After all, I'd just been promoted to a new role, and life was going well, if busier than ever. Then, "You need to talk to Dad." The same message came from my brothers and sisters several times a day. They delivered it through texts, phone calls, and emails. And every time it came, I had the same thought. Why did I need to talk to Dad? Couldn't one of them do it? What was so wrong that it needed my attention right now? I had customers to please, employees to lead, and senior executives demanding answers. I was busy. I found myself stretched thin, unable to find the time or energy to have another difficult conversation with my father. My responsibilities at the bank were reaching a breaking point, with my days filled to the brim with complex, high-stakes, and emotionally charged calls. The demands were so relentless that I barely had a moment to catch my breath between meetings. Personal pleasures like my fitness routine, date nights with my husband, weekend gatherings with my children, and most crucially a full night's sleep, had to be sacrificed. By the time I wrapped up my workday, which often stretched well past the stroke of midnight, I was in no state to engage in any meaningful dialogue. The last thing I wanted to face was a heavy discussion with my dad about his life choices. I was out of gas. My father was living with a terminal cancer diagnosis. But while his body was ravaged by the disease, his mind remained sharp as a tack. He refused to surrender and spend his remaining time as a victim. He wanted to stay connected with the world for as long as he could. Other people, primarily my family and the doctors, did not agree with his approach. They felt Dad would be best served by sitting back and conserving whatever energy he had left. They told him he had worked so hard for so long and he deserved a break. My father ignored them, almost in defiance. He tackled a home improvement project that he'd postponed for years, the refurbishment of his computer desk and credenza. My siblings were concerned about the physical strain associated with this activity. At only 86 pounds, Dad spent all day lugging wood, table saws, and other materials up and down the stairs of his house. And at the end of each day, there was a sawdusty mess left in his wake. My family didn't get it. What could be the rationale behind remodeling a desk he would never get to use? Since Dad clearly wasn't listening to reason, the family called me in to help restore some sanity to the situation. But I was just so busy. I didn't have time to referee a match between my hard-headed siblings and even harder-headed Dad. Weeks went by with the situation unchanged. One morning, I shouted at my sister through the phone, "Please, just leave Dad alone!" I was tightly wound.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?